Joe Burrow is out for the season with the wrist injury. And I want to address the thing off the top that everyone's talking about right now with the NFL investigation or speculating that the Cincinnati Bengals held Joe Burrow off of the injury report based on things that they saw on social media, videos, and pictures. Of course, the post got taken down of what people thought was a soft cast on Joe Burrow's thumb. But we just need to completely stop this about the whole speculation of hiding Burrow's injury. I know it's easy to want to jump on a franchise like the Cincinnati Bengals, who's been under the limelight, been under the spotlight even before, and of course during the Joe Burrow era when we talk about how they've taken care of him as a player. I know it's easy to want to rag on a franchise like this, but when you take a look at the actual facts of what happened in the game for the Ravens, it was the play right before Joe Burrow heard the pop when he threw the touchdown pass to Joe Mixon, and we see him grimacing in pain. Jadeveon Clowney sacked him on the offensive line. Of course, we look at that issue again. And when he goes down on Joe Burrow, Burrow lands on his wrist, kind of awkwardly rolls on it. And, Burrow even said in the post-game presser that he didn't even feel that happen at the time. Once he was looking back at the tablet and back at the replays, then he realized, oh, wow, it actually did roll up under me on that play. He had a lot of adrenaline. He had a lot of grit going. I give a lot of respect to also Zach Taylor in the post-game presser, literally telling people that what they saw with the compression sleeve on his arm on the plane and when he was getting off of the plane, that it had nothing to do with this specific injury. You look at the fact that players, when they get to those high altitudes in the NFL, many players on many parts of their body, they wear compression sleeves to literally keep your muscles and your joints and ligaments from swelling when you go on high altitudes in the flight. Joe Burrow was being precautious, wearing it on his throwing arm. We know Joe Burrow hasn't dealt with any sort of arm or wrist injury before the season. It was the calf injury. It was the knee injury a few years ago. So for everyone out there trying to say that that the Bengals might be doing him dirty in this situation, you got to know the facts. You got to put it out in front of you. Hats off to Joe Burrow, talking about how he someone was like, man, is that pain for you? What was that pain like? He was like, it's not really pain when you're on the field, man. You're just out there. It is what it is. This happens to plenty of players around the league. This is a risk of playing football in. And Burrow just being so cold blooded about it, putting the facts out there, knowing that, hey, this is what happened. I've got to rehab. I got to go get healthy and continue on through the season. But now Jake Browning steps in as the backup quarterback, and of course there's AJ McCarron backing him up as well in this instance for the Bengals. But you kind of want to ask the question of, all right, are there maybe some teams out there to where or not teams, are there maybe some free agent quarterbacks out there to where the Bengals might pursue them and want to go sign them? And there's not many. Of course, we can throw some names out there and speculate all we want, but I do think the best situation for the Bengals is the guys that they have in the building in Jake Browning and in AJ McCarron. I mean, maybe they could go and sign Jake Luton if they wanted to. The Saints just released him a few weeks ago to just bring in a body at the quarterback position. Nick Foles could maybe come in, but he hasn't been really anything in his career past a backup quarterback. And of course, we can hope for the magical Nick Foles that came and took Philly to the Super Bowl, but that's realistically not going to happen. I've seen some names of maybe Ryan Tannehill getting released since Will Levis and Malik Willis are in the building. We know the trade deadline is passed, so it would have to be a release and a pickup from waivers. Maybe a Jimmy G since Aiden O'Connell has now been moved on to with Antonio Pierce. Maybe a Mac Jones because Bill Belichick has now benched him again. And who knows if it's going to be Bailey Zappi, Will Grier, Malik Cunningham, the special teams coach that's going to go out there for quarterback. We really don't know for the Patriots. But if there's a key thing between those three quarterbacks in Tannehill, Jimmy G, and Mac Jones, none of them can overcome adversity. None of them can overcome dysfunction. And that is what has made Joe Burrow so special. That is what has gotten him in the consistent top 3-2 rankings of quarterbacks in the NFL, dealing with a dysfunctional coach at the time when he came in, who has slowly gotten better over the years, dealing with a dysfunctional franchise when he walked in before taking them to the AFC title games in the Super Bowl, dealing with that dysfunctional, horrible, on average, 7th or 8th worst offensive line in the league in terms of sacks given up. Ryan Tannehill can't do that. We can maybe say that he kind of did in the year that, Vrabel had to use 90 players on his starting roster in order to get them through the season. And they did have the 1 seed in the AFC at that time. But Tannehill has to have things go correctly for him. I said Jimmy G wasn't going to be successful with the Raiders because he was going to have to overcome dysfunction and overcome a bad defense. I don't believe Jimmy G can do that. And Mac Jones, outside of his rookie year when the defense was good, he hasn't been able to overcome dysfunction either. And that's why the Bengals have such a special quarterback in Joe Burrow, because he's able to become anointed, overcome that dysfunction, do what he's got to do, win big games when things aren't going your way in Cincinnati. And that is why Jake Browning and I almost said Jake Luton. Jake Browning and AJ McCarron, I think, are without question the best solutions or the best quarterbacks in this instance to fill in for Joe Burrow's injury. You got to at least appreciate the fact that Joe Burrow, last pass of the season for him was a touchdown pass that Joe makes, and he takes it in to score, in the game. But if we want to talk about a season prediction or kind of an outlook for the Bengals for the rest of this season, unfortunately, with them sitting at 5-5, just like the Buffalo Bills, they're going to be a ninth, 10th, maybe 11th seed in the AFC. I didn't look at the exact seedings. I just know off the top of my head, Buffalo is that 10th seed with the 5-5, with the 5-5 record. But when you look at the schedule for the Cincinnati Bengals, I can see them beating the Colts and maybe splitting with the Steelers, but Kansas City, the Browns, the Vikings, and the Jags, right now, I feel like those are all losses as we talk about these two guys going forward for the backup quarterback in Cincinnati. And unfortunately, as much as this feels like razor blades coming out of my mouth right now, I think at best the Cincinnati Bengals win two more games this season. Two more. At best, this is looking as it's like a 7-10, maybe an 8-9 football team. But I'm genuinely worried about Joe Burrow's durability now. I said it earlier in the year. I don't want Joe Burrow to become Andrew Luck when the Bengals should have sat Joe Burrow early on in the year because he was dealing with the calf injury. When will the Bengals say that it's the second highest paid in NFL history behind Deshaun Watson? One of the biggest quarterback contracts in the league. You're willingly paying him that money. The dysfunction with Joe Burrow and really just that offensive line is absolutely horrendous. I didn't even get a chance to tally up all the sacks that Joe Burrow's taken in his career, but I'll break it down for you like this. Joe Burrow's rookie year, he had the fifth worst offensive line in terms of sacks given up the year he was drafted. He blew out his knee his rookie year. The third worst offensive line the year he comes back from the injury, takes them to the Super Bowl. The third worst O-line that year in terms of sacks given up. The year after, when they go back to the AFC title game, the 11th most sacks given up after spending all that money in the trenches on a Ted Karras, on an Alex Kappa. We remember talking about those moves for the Bengals at the time because they were huge. Joe Burrow needed to be protected. And then the 11th most this year. On average, he has, no joke, had the 7th to 8th worst offensive line in terms of sacks given up since he's been in the NFL. I don't want Joe Burrow to turn out like Andrew Luck. Blew out his knee because the O-line was bad, had the calf injury in preseason and in training camp, and now he's out for the year with the wrist. Jadeveon Clowney getting through and getting a sack on Burrow is really what ignited that. We knew he blew out his knee because the line absolutely collapsed for him at the time, and the calf is going to be the calf. But Joe Burrow's durability continues to concern me as we get deeper and deeper into his career, because I don't want to see him be a guy, unfortunately, like a Deshaun Watson that we're going to talk about soon, like an Andrew Luck that I've already mentioned a couple times in the show and in previous ones. He's such a generational talent, a guy that came out of LSU, defied the odds, and immediately provided success and prosperity for the Cincinnati Bengals. He has to be protected. He has to be better taken care of. And he has to be able to be available to go forward. And it's no question that he's the franchise quarterback. But the mismanagement of Joe Burrow is just disgusting at this point with the Bengals. You got Joe Burrow out for the year with his wrist injury. Just talking about this list of quarterbacks, reputable quarterback names that are out for the year due to injury. Joe Burrow with the wrist, Deshaun Watson with the shoulder, Kirk Cousins with the Achilles. You got Daniel Jones with the knee. You got Anthony Richardson with the shoulder injury. And then Aaron Rodgers, of course, within the first few plays of the season for the Jets, popping his Achilles. So it's not getting any easier on the quarterback position this year. Karen, what's up? Good to see you, girl. Appreciate you hopping in the show tonight. But it's ugly for Joe Burrow at this point with the way that Cincinnati's not able to protect him, with the way that the durability is already becoming an issue, because we all love Joe Burrow. We want to see Joe Burrow go and do big things. And more than anything, we want to see Joe Burrow go and win that coveted Super Bowl.